C# variables. So as we are aware, in every programming language like C#, Java, JavaScript, we need to declare variable names to store the values into the memory. So variable is a name storage location in memory that holds a value. The type of the variable determines what kind of data it can store, such as numbers, text, or objects. Variables in C# are fundamental to programming as they allow you to store, modify, and retrieve the data from the memory. So suppose in our program, we are declaring one integer type variable x is equal to 5. So in memory, there are different memory locations like 101, 102, and 104. So these are the memory address. So runtime environment will store this value at this location, suppose. So this memory is identified by variable name x. So runtime environment will store the 5 value at 101, and this 101 memory address would be identified by runtime environment by x variable name. To create a variable, you must specify the type and assign it a value. So the type is identified according to its data. So what kind of data we are going to assign, like numbers, text, or objects to that particular variable. So here string is a data type, name is a variable name, and Sunil is a value. So this is the syntax. So first we have to define a type of it, then variable name and the value which you want to assign to that particular variable name. So here int is a data type, I is a variable name, and 1, 2, 3 is a value. We can also declare variable without assigning any value to it like this. So int is a data type and j is a variable name. We can also declare many variables in single line of same data type. Int x is equal to 5, y is equal to 6, and z is equal to 50. So here x, y, and z all having the same data type, which is nothing but the integer. Declaration. When you declare a variable, you specify its type and name. Type determines what kind of value the variable can store, like int, string, or bool. Name and identifier you use to refer to the variable in your code. So int is the type and age is the identifier, that is also called as variable name. Here string is the data type and name is the variable name. Initialization. You can assign a value to variable at the time of declaration or later in code. So here int is the data type, age is the variable name, and 25 is a value which we want to assign to age variable. So whenever we're declaring the variable, we can also assign a value to it. It is also called as initialization. So declaring and initializing age with value 25. Here string is the data type, name is a variable name, and John is a value to it. Declaring and initializing name with John over here. Assignment. You can change the value of variable later in your program. So suppose initially we have declared age variable of type integer and we are assigning 25 value to it. Now we want to update that value. So in our code, we simply write like this, age is equal to 30. So the now age variable contains 30 value instead of 25. Naming rules. So whenever we declare variables in our code, we need to follow some naming rules. Valid characters. Variable names can contain letters, digits, underscores, and the dollar sign. However, they cannot start with a digit. So in C#, this is not allowed. 1, 2, 3, x, y, z, or string variable 2, 3, 5, t is equal to Sunil. So this is not allowed in C#. Case sensitivity. As we are aware, C# is a case sensitive programming language. So variable names are also case sensitive. For example, here my variable and this my variable, between these m is smaller over here and m is capital over here. And in third variable name, all the letters are in capital. So those are considered different identifiers rather than same in C sharp. So it is a case sensitive language. No special characters. Avoid using spaces and special characters like at, hash, and percentage sign, and etc. in variable names. So C sharp not allows using spaces and special characters in variable names. Developer also need to follow some naming conventions whenever they want to declare variable names and function names and classes. So descriptive names. Choose names that clearly describe the purpose of the variable like age, total price, customer name. So developer has to use some descriptive names instead of short names. Camel case. Use camel case for local variables and parameters. So whenever you want to declare local variables or function parameters, you need to follow camel case. So it is a good practice. So here first name and total amount. So in both variable names, the first character is in small letter and subsequent words, first character is in capital letter. In camel case, the first letter of the identifier is lowercase and each subsequent word starts with an uppercase letter. There are no spaces and underscores between words. Pascal case. So you need to follow Pascal case whenever you want to declare properties, methods, and class names. In Pascal case, the first letter of each word in identifier is uppercase with no spaces or underscores between words. So the difference between camel case and Pascal case, in camel case, the first letter of first word is in smaller case, but in Pascal case, every word's first character should be in capital letter like customer age. So there are different types of C sharp variables, read-only variables, local variables, instance variables, static variables, and constant variables. So let's discuss local variables first. Variables declared within a method, constructor, or block are called as local variables. So inside loops or conditional statements, so those variables can be considered as a local variables. And after completion of its task of method, the memory allocated to that local variables would be deleted by runtime environment. Scope limited to the method or block in which they are declared. They cannot be accessed outside of this scope. Lifetime created when the method is called and destroyed when the method exits. Initialization must be initialized before use. They don't have a default value. So whenever you want to declare local variables, you need to assign value to it before use it in further program. So here we have declared one function calculate sum. So we are doing some calculations over there. So in calculate sum function, we have declared one local variable sum, which is of integer data type. And in for loop, we are just adding the value of I into the sum. So as soon as this calculate sum function gets executed, the memory allocated to some variable would be deleted from the memory. So let's understand local variables and its scope with the help of this program. So here I am taking namespace using system. After that, declaring our own namespace over here with the help of namespace keyword. In namespace, I am declaring one class program which contains static void main method. So as per the definition of the local variables, variables declared within a method or constructor or block are called as local variables. And the scope limited to the method or block in which they are declared. They cannot be accessed outside of this scope. What does it mean? Let's understand with the help of this program. So now I am declaring one function, public int sum, which accepts two parameters, integer x and integer y. Also declaring one more variable result over here is equal to x plus y and returning the result. So as this result variable is declared in some function, it will not accessible outside of this function. So if I'm trying to use that variable in main method, it will throw the exception at compile time only. Result is equal to 50. So at compile time, compiler is showing exception. The name result does not exist in the current context. If I am trying to build the application, it will throw the same exception. The name result does not exist in the current context because it is declared in some function and not in a main method. Even if I declare any variable within this scope, integer x is equal to 10 and y is equal to 0. And if I am trying to use that variable outside this scope, it will throw similar exception. The name x does not exist in the current context because this x variable is declared in this particular scope. So the braces in which that variable is declared define the scope of that particular variable. Must be initialized before use. They don't have a default value. So let's understand this as well. Suppose I'm declaring variable t is equal to not equal to 0. Here I'm only declaring the variable, and if I'm trying to use that variable in further code, it will throw an exception. Use of unassigned local variable t, and if I'm trying to build the application, it will throw same exception. Use of unassigned local variable t. To avoid this error, if I have assigned any value to it that is default value, then it will not throw any exception and we can execute this statement successfully if we run this application. So let's print this on console. So the initial value of t is 7, and after this statement, the value of t would be 8. So it will print on command prompt 8 as a result value of t. Yes, the program is run successfully and now it's showing value of t is 8. Instance variables. Variables declared within a class but outside of any method, also known as fields or non-static fields. Scope. Accessible to all methods within the same instance of a class. So suppose in one class there are different methods, and if we are declaring any instance variables in that particular class, so those variables would be available in each and every function which was declared in same class. Lifetime. They exist as long as the instance of the class exists. Default initialization. Automatically initialize to default values like 0 for integers and null for objects. In case of instance variable, it will take default value according to its data type. Usage. Instance variables store data unique to each object of the class. So let's discuss the example. So we have declared one class car over here. Also declared some attributes like color and model. It is also called as properties. So here color is a string data type and model have the string data type as well. So these are the instance variables. So whenever we create the object of car class, those variables also created on memory. So here with the help of new operator, we are creating the object of car1. And if you want to use that attributes, you just have to write car1 dot color is equal to red. So here car1 dot color has the value red over here and model sedan. So what are instance variables? Variables declared within a class but outside of any method are known as instance variables, accessible to all methods within the same instance of the class. Suppose I am declaring one more class over here, class instance scope. And here I am declaring two variables, int z is equal to 90 and int y is equal to 80. And there is one more function, public void display, which will print those values on command prompt. Z is equal to plus Z and Y is equal to plus Y. So this line will print value of Z on command prompt. So initial value of Z is 90 and the Y is 80. So in this function, we are just printing the variables Z and Y over here. So it is not giving any exception because those are instance variables and are available in all functions which was declared in same class. So we can take one more function over here which will return result of after multiplication, which will accept int x and int y. Return x into y. So here we have declared two functions in instance scope class. One is display and another one is multiplication. If I am trying to use these variables z and y over here, it will not throw any exception because z and y are instance variables and can be available in display function as well as in multiplication function. So let's z into y. So let's remove these parameters. If I'm trying to compile this application, it will not throw any exception. Yes, one succeeded. It's not throwing any exception. So in static void main method, let's create the object of that class. The name of the class is instance scope. With the help of new operator, I have created the object of class and calling the instant display method as well as instance scope multiplication method. So these are the instance variables which are declared at class level. So all these variables are available in display function as well as in multiplication function. Let's debug this code. F10, yes, object is created. So the default value of y is 80 and z is 90. Now we are calling the display function. Let's press F11. So we can enter into the display function and we are just printing the values of z and y on command prompt. Yes, z is equal to 90 and y is equal to 80. After that, we are calling multiplication function, return z into y. So it will not throw any exception. So z and y are available in display function as well as in multiplication function, because these both functions are a part of instance scope only, and z and y parameters are also a part of class instance scope. Automatically initialize to default values, 0 for integers and null for objects. Okay, let's understand this as well. So here, suppose I'm not assigning any value to it. So it will not throw any exception at compile time as well as at runtime, because the default value of integer z is 0 and y is also a 0. If I am declaring string variable test and not assigning any value to it, then the default value would be null over here. So let's debug the application again. So value of z is 0 and y is also 0 and test is null. So those variables are declared as instance variables, can contain default values according to its data type. So for test, it is null. For y, it is 0. And for z, it is also a 0, because both variables are integer data type. And it will not throw any exception over here. 0 into 0 means 0. Static variables. Variables declared with the static keyword within a class, they are associated with the class itself rather than any specific instance. So to use static variables, we need not to create object of that particular class. We can directly access those variables with the name of class in which they have declared. Scope, accessible across all instances of the class and shared among all instances. In case of instance variable, whenever we creating the object of that class, separate object is created into the memory for those variables. But in case of static variables, same object is shared between all the instances. Lifetime, created when the program starts and destroyed when the program terminates. Initialization, initialize only once and retain their value between calls. Use case, useful for values that should be shared across all instances, such as configuration setting or counter. So let's have one example for it. So we have declared one class company in which there is the attribute employee count, public static int. So here we are using the keyword static over here. So this is static variable. To identify the variable whether it is static or not, you need to check whether this keyword is used at the time of declaration or not. Public company. In public company function, we are just incrementing the value of employee count. So it will be shared all instances. Variables declared with the static keyword within a class, they are associated with the class itself rather than any specific instance. Accessible across all instances of the class and shared among all instances. So let's modify this program. Suppose these are static variables. Public static int. So these are the static variables, because at the time of declaration, we have write keyword static over here. Let's assign some default value to it. 90 equal to 80. So if I want to use these variables z and y in static void main method, let's try to access it with the help of object. Here you can see that those variables are not available because those are static variables and not the instance variables. But test variable would be available in main method. Test, yes, test is available, but z and y is not available because those are static variables and not the instance variable. So if you want to use static variables, you have to simply use class name for it without creating any object of it. Let's delete this instance scope dot. Now y and z is available. So if you want to use static variables, then you just have to use class name and dot operator, and you can able to use or access that particular variable in your function. So let's print the value of it on console. X, not X, it's a Y value. So let's print Y only. So let's debug the application now. So we are not creating any object of instance scope, but we can use the value of variable Y over here. So now 80 value would be printed on console. Yes, 80. Accessible across all instances of the class and shared among all instances. Lifetime. Created when the program starts and destroyed when the program terminates. Initialize only once and retain their value between calls. So what does it mean? Suppose we are incrementing the value of y variable, which is declared as static variable. So in first line, we are incrementing the value of y by 1. So initial value was 80, and after this statement, it would be 81. And let's create object of that class and call function display. So in display function, we are printing the value of z. So initial value of z is 90. After that, this statement, not z. So initial value of y is 80. After this statement, it should be 81. We have modified the value of y with the help of class name as it is, because it is a static variable. And if I am creating another object, that is instance scope, and trying to call display method, then display method should get updated value of z. Again, I am creating one more object over here, that is instance scope 2, and trying to call same function display. So display function again write or show updated value only. So let's debug the application. So in first statement, we are incrementing the value of y. Now the value of y is 81, which is a static variable. Yes, 81. After that, we are creating the object of instance scope class and calling the display function. It will throw the exception. It will throw exception because test is a null over here. So let's assign some default value to it. So at the time of declaration or before printing it or using it in our program. So let's debug the application again. Now we are calling display function. Now test variable has a value Sunil, and we are printing the values on command prompts. Now z is equal to 90, y is equal to 81, test is equal to Sunil. So here the same copy of static variable shared between this object and instance scope 2 objects. So instance scope 2 object also have the same value of y. So let's enter into the display function again with the help of second object. And again, we are printing the value. So the value is same for y, that is nothing but the 81. So it proves that for static variables, initialize only once and retain their values between different calls. Constant variables. So the constant variables declared with const keyword, these variables are assigned at compile time and cannot be changed afterward. So what does it mean? At the time of declaration, we have to assign a value to it and it cannot be changed in at runtime. Scope. Their scope is the same as any other variable, but they must be initialized where they are declared. Lifetime. They exist for the duration of the program. Characteristics. Constants are static by default, meaning they belong to the class rather than any instance. So it is similar to static variable only. Use cases. Ideal for values that are known at compile time and will never change, like mathematical constants or configuration values. So the pi value is, as we are aware, 3.14 only throughout the application. So that variable should be a constant variable. So here we have declared one class circle and we are declaring one pi variable over here with const keyword and the value of const variable is 3.14. So this is a constant value for circle to calculate the area of it. So let's discuss constant variables now. Constant variables declared with const keyword. These variables are assigned at compile time and cannot be changed afterward. Their scope is the same as any other variable, but they must be initialized where they are declared. So let's make this z function as a const instead of static. So if we are not assigning any value at the time of declaration to constant variable, it will throw an exception. A const field requires a value to be provided. So if I am trying to compile the application, it will throw same exception. A const field requires a value to be provided. So we have, whenever you declare any constant variable, we need to assign some value at the time of declaration only. And once it is declared and assigned, we cannot modify the value of z again afterwards. So if I am trying to assign some new value to z, it will throw exception. The left hand side of the assignment must be a variable or property or index. So we cannot change the value of z in display function as well. And with the help of scope scope object as well. So constants are static by default, meaning they belong to the class rather than any instance. So the constant variables are similar to static variables only, but we cannot change the value of that particular variable after the assignment at the time of compilation. So here, if I'm trying to access z parameter with the help of object, then z is not available over here. But as like static variables with the help of class name, z variable is available. So let's print the value on console. Yes, 20 is the value of z at the time of declaration only. And if I'm trying to modify that value, it will throw a exception at compile time only. Yes, it will not allow to modify the value of const variables. Ideal for values that are known at compile time and will never change, like mathematical constants or configuration values. Read-only variables. So read-only variables are similar to constant variables, but we can modify the value of read-only variables at runtime as well with the help of constructor. But after that, that value cannot be changed further. So what is read-only variables? Declared with the read-only keyword, these variables can be assigned at declaration or in the constructor, but cannot be modified thereafter. So what is the scope of the read-only variables? Their scope can be instance level or static level. If we are using static keyword at the time of declaration, then the scope of the read-only variables would be at static level only. Otherwise, it would be at instance level. Lifetime, similar to instance or static variables, depending on whether read-only is used with static or not. So what are the characteristics of the read-only variables? Unlike constants, read-only variables are set at runtime rather than at compile time. So constant variables must be initialized at compile time only, but read-only variables can be assigned at runtime as well. Use cases useful for values that depend on the runtime conditions or need to be initialized during object creation, but should not change after that. So let's have one more example. So here we have declared one class, that is config class. Suppose in our application there are multiple configuration files. So according to situation at runtime, we need to pass that particular file path to this constructor. So developer, whenever want to use that particular path, he need to create the object of this config class and need to pass that particular path to this constructor. So that path can be assigned to config file path. So henceforth, this value cannot be changed after that. Declared with the read-only keyword, these variables can be assigned at the declaration or in the constructor, but cannot be modified thereafter. Their scope can be instance level or static level, similar to instance or static variables, depending on whether read-only is used with static or not. Unlike constants, read-only variables are set at runtime rather than at compile time. So let's make this z variable as a read-only variable. So read-only variable is now an instance variable over here. So if you want to use that variable, you need to use a object of that particular class. Said. But we cannot change that value once it is declared at the time of compilation. So read-only variables can be changed at runtime in its constructor only. So we can modify the value at constructor level. But if I am trying to change that value in another function, then it will throw exception. A read-only field cannot be assigned to except in constructor or init-only setter of the type in which field is defined or variable initializer. Means read-only variables should be assigned at compile time or in constructor at runtime. Yes, here default value is Z because we are not assigning any value to it. But at the time of creation of the object, so here we are creating the object of class. So at that time we can modify that particular value. So let's make this constructor as a parameterized constructor and assign that value to Z. So at the time of object creation, we need to pass the value which would be assigned to read-only variable. So in function, we cannot change the value of read-only variable, but in constructor, we can. So let's debug the application now. So here, first object is created, and here the second object we are creating. So now we are in constructor, and the value which we are passing is 56 and assigned to Z variable. After that, we are calling display function. So now the value of Z is 56 because at the time of object creation, we are passing 56 value to its constructor. So that's why it is 56. Again, we are creating the another object of same class and passing the value 85. So at runtime, initial value of Z is 0. And we are passing 85 to it. And now the value of Z is 85 as well. So let's call the display function by using second object. So now the value of Z is 85. So we can modify the read-only variable value at runtime with the help of constructor only. So let's summarize all variable types. Local variables. So whenever you want to declare a local variable, you need not to use any keyword for that at the time of declaration. And the local variables have scope till method and at block level only and must be initialized before use. And we can modify the local variables once it is declared as well as after the initialization. So we can modify local variable at any time. And it would be associated with method or block in which it has declared. So the second variable type is instance variable, similar to local variables. If you want to declare instance variable, you need not to use any keyword for that. Also, the scope of the instance variables is up to the class in which it is declared, and all the functions which is associated with that class can be accessed those instance variables. automatically set to default values. So if you haven't assigned any value to instance variable, then it will take a default value of its data type. So for integer variables, it will take 0, and for string variables, it will take null. And we can modify instance variable after its declaration as well as after initialization of it. And it should be associated with instance of a class. So the next one is static variables. So if you want to declare a static variable, then you need to use static keyword for that. And the scope of the static variables are at class wide, and it would be shared among all the instances. So it is not bound to any specific instance. It is bound to class only. So it's initialized once per program life cycle. So every instance of that class can access these static variables in the application. It would be modified after its declaration as well as initialization. Next one is constant variable. So if you want to declare constant variable, then you need to use const keyword for that. And constant variables are similar to static variables only. It would not be associated with any particular object. So it would be shared between multiple instances as like static variables. But constant variables cannot be modified after its declaration. And at the time of declaration only, you need to assign the value to it. So at runtime, we cannot modify the value of constant variables as well as at compile time. So constant variables are static by default. So the next one is read-only variables. So if you want to declare read-only variables, then you need to use read-only keyword for that. And read-only variables are instance specific or static. At the time of declaration, if you use static keyword, then it would be behave as a static variable. And if static keyword is not used, then it would be behave as an instance variable. So read-only variables can be assigned at the time of declaration and as well as at runtime in its constructor. But after that, we cannot modify the value of read-only variables. So it is associated with instance or a class according to its declaration. And if the static keyword is used, then it would be behave as static, otherwise instance specific.